At rehearsal, he would usually let an orchestra play a piece straight through before giving any notes.
Mr. Lewis, I'm thoroughly with you in your obvious reluctance to rehearse on a morning as chilly and dismal as this, but please do try and keep in touch with us from time to time. What is your name? Yes.
Ball, Sir Thomas.
I beg your pardon.
Ball, Sir Thomas.
Ball? Oh, ball. How very singular.
Once in America, he felt disinclined to rehearse the awkward cello part in Brahms' second piano concerto.
Yes, I think we'll just run through the closing bars.
Oh, but Sir Thomas, I must rehearse the cello part. The piece is entirely unfamiliar to me. I've never played it before.
You'll love it.
Even off the podium, Beecham was beginning to be a familiar face.
On one occasion, I was shopping in the emporium of Messrs. Fortnum and Mason, and I happened to notice a lady waving to me from across the department. Well, I knew her face very well, but I could not for the life of me for the moment think who she was, so I tried to escape. But too late, she was on me with her hand outstretched. "Good morning, Mr. Beecham," she said, "and how are you?" I said, "I'm very well, thank you. How are you?" She said, "Oh, I'm extremely well, thank you. How are your family?" And I said, "Oh, they're all pretty well, thank you. How are your family?" She said, "Oh, they're extremely well, thank you. My brother's been a little under the weather lately, but nothing serious." I said, "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that." She said, "No, he's just been overtired, a bit overdoing it, you know. He's perfectly all right, really." I said, "Oh, good. Tell me," I said, "what is your brother doing just at the moment?" And she said, "Well, he's still king."
At the beginning of the century, there was no orchestral standard to speak of. However, one day, Beecham was visited by Charles Draper, the foremost clarinetist in the country. He and a few other first-class musicians had formed a new chamber orchestra.
Oh, yes, I took them on, and in 1907, I expanded them, and in the ample accommodation of the Queen's Hall, we gave a series of concerts devoted to the works of unknown composers.
Beecham was determined to become London's first impresario conductor. In November 1907, an unexpected visitor to the country came to hear the new symphony orchestra.
It was Frederick Delius, who had arrived only a few days before from Rome. Now, here was a composer whom I'd never seen before, whose work was quite unlike any others or anything that was being written at that time. People didn't seem to know what the devil to make of it. Well, I found it as alluring as a wayward woman, and I determined to tame it. It wasn't done in a day.
Nothing of Delius's music had been played in England since the concerts he conducted himself between 1899 and 1907.
Yes, you might just as well talk to a child as talk to the average manager about Delius, or about anything out of the common. He knows about half a dozen composers, that's about it. Just as the average virtuoso on the piano or the fiddle knows about 5 or 6 concertos. Won't bother to learn any more. That'll see him through. He can go on doing those for the rest of his life. Now, a village Romeo and Juliet is, at any rate, a masterpiece, and yet you never hear it in either of our 2 opera houses in London. But then why should you? The public don't know it. The managers don't know it. The people who run the opera business, let's call it, they don't know the work. They don't know Ermelin. They don't know the magic fountain. Well, that's understandable. They don't know coanga. They don't know what is dramatic in an opera. There is a point of view rather prevalent in this country and also in America that an opera cannot be dramatic unless it has 5 or 6 people slaughtered on stage in conditions of horror, or at least under very disagreeable circumstances. But a charming idyll, a story of young people that is not without interest and certainly not without music and beauty, and which ends in a tragic way that is, to my view, quite remarkable. No horror. Lots of pity, but no terror. Well, that isn't dramatic. Often I'd be working on a score of his, and I'd say, "Now, look, Frederick, about this bit here. I'd like to know what you'd like done with it." And he'd say, "Well, I can't remember now, but do what you like with it." Now, that's very charming, isn't it? And I've applied that principle to the work of every other composer. Now, I can't tell you what would have happened to this music if I hadn't existed as a conductor. I can't even begin to think what would have happened. But one thing I do know, the large majority of performances of his works would have been totally unrepresentative of Frederick Delius, and that might have meant his departure from the musical scene 20 or 30 years ago. Yes, that I do know.